So morning everyone. As a follow-up to the article that I wrote about propagation in the most recent issue of the Holly Society of America journal, just want to elaborate on a few things that I mentioned in that article, specifically about mist settings. I've had a couple of inquiries about that. How do you know when to turn the mist up? How do you know when to turn the mist back on the cuttings? Well, it's morning right now. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of it depends on the temperature outside, the temperature of the greenhouse when I come in, and whether it's sunny or not. So as you can see, there's still a little bit of moisture on the leaves from last night. This particular crop of cuttings has already rooted. They have not rooted through the peat pots yet, so it's safe to say that I can cut the mist back sufficiently at night. But because it is a sunny day today, and it's supposed to get a little warm this afternoon before we get rain, probably between 75 and 80 degrees outside. So that, in combination with the sun, I will turn the mist up on these cuttings today. So what does that mean? It means that I will decrease the minutes of time between mistings, probably to come on about every 12 minutes. And I will increase the duration of the mist, probably to run about 10 seconds every 12 minutes. And that should provide sufficient moisture for these cuttings on a day like today. As I mentioned, these have rooted already. This is Ilex attenuata longwood gold. And how can I tell they're rooted? Well, I just kind of come over here and I'm going to gently tug at the cutting, and this one tugs back for sure. I know it's really well on its way to rooting through the peat pot, so I don't want to get the foliage too wet at night. Let's look at some other ones. This is Ilex opaca Stewart silver crown. This one roots kind of fairly easy. Not as easy as a Christmas snow, which is another variegated opaca. But this one tends to be doing exceptionally well. We had a very dry, very hot July and August. So these cuttings did not have a lot of moisture in the wood to begin with when they were cut. Sometimes that can be an advantage. It does affect the mist settings that we use in the beginning. Sometimes we need to increase the mist a little more than usual when the wood is drier. Other times, if we've had a cool, wet summer, we don't need to have the mist up as much as usual. I just want to point out this rosy color to the leaf here. So we're seeing a lot of that this year, and again, that is due to heat stress from different conditions during the summertime. This is Ilex opaca Lynns Gold. Lynns Gold is a variegated male opaca. It's a sport off of a male seedling. And Lynns Gold tends to be rather pithy. That means the wood, cutting wood usually has a lot of air pockets in it. It's at first glance, when you look at the wood, it doesn't look like it would be easy to root, but surprisingly, the cuttings tend to root 100%. So you can tell that these are have really taken. It's a nice showy leaf on there. This particular selection is not in the trade at all. That's because of the lack of parent plants to get good cutting wood off of. This is one that I do hope to see a little bit more of in the trade, although it takes time to build up quantities of a plant like this, and then it's necessary to find a good grower who is willing to put the plant into production. So one good way to do that is for me to root the plants, pot them up, and make them available to members of the Holly Society through our plant auction that we have at when we get back to having in-person meetings. And who knows, in the future, maybe we will be able to offer this as a test holly at some point once we get the quantities of Ilex opaca Lynns Gold built up. Okay, this particular crop of cuttings were just stuck this past week. Today is October 16th. This group was just stuck yesterday, October 15th. And you can see how gently we do stick the cuttings into the peat pot. We don't take the cutting and stick it all the way to the bottom of the pot. We only stick it in the pot maybe about 1/4 to 1/2 inch just above the wound over the node of that cutting. So these are a little bit on the dry side this morning, but that's okay. We don't want them to get too wet. We want them to start callousing up nicely. And we have had rain the past couple of weeks, so the moisture level is up in these cuttings a little bit more than the first crop that we stuck. So this is Ilex Edward Stevens. This is the male companion to Nellie Stevens. This is a very, very beautiful male holly. Does really well as a background for other hollies, winterberries, deciduous trees. It's just a very, very majestic, very nice male holly. This is Ilex Coniana Wort Win. This one takes a little bit longer, but is well worth the extra attention that it needs paid attention to. This is another one of my up-and-coming favorites. A little known in the industry. It's Ilex opaca Clarendon spreading. I'm sure you've all heard of Maryland spreader or Maryland dwarf, which stays smaller than the Ilex Clarendon spreading. Tends to have a little faster growth rate than Ilex opaca Maryland spreader or Maryland dwarf. You can see that the mist has just come on. It'll be on for 12 seconds. It does sufficiently get the leaves to the moisture level that they need to sustain for 12 minutes until they begin to dry out, and then the mist will come on again. So it's not unusual for me to come into the greenhouse in the morning and see spider webs, and those are spider webs of the bowl and doily weaver spider. Spider webs on cuttings like this can be an indicator, a good indicator, that the cuttings are receiving sufficient moisture overnight. It is not a bad thing. So I just want to try to put the cutting process in perspective a little bit. I showed you the recently stuck cuttings of Edward Stevens, which are right here. These were just stuck yesterday, which was October 15th. This is a cutting of Edward Stevens that was stuck about a year ago in the greenhouse. So these are sufficiently rooted through the peat pots. This particular peat pot is screaming to get into a 1 gallon. This will be a winter project. Some of the hollies that we don't get to just remain in the peat pots, and then we pot them up in the winter time to give them a head start for the following spring, and they just stay in the greenhouse all winter. But what I'd like to show you is the parent tree, Edward Stevens, that we took these cuttings off of. So this is a comparison, and again I say this is just a beautiful, very majestic male holly. I just can't say enough about Edward Stevens and also John Morris holly, Ilex John Morris, which is a companion to Lydia Morris. They are just faster than usual growth habit. They just make a really nice dark green evergreen background for deciduous trees and also the deciduous hollies, and some of the lower evergreen hollies as well. They look very nice planted in amongst them and interspersed amongst other types of hollies. So this is a rooted cutting. This is Edward. We took the cuttings off of this particular tree 1 year ago. So from a rooted 1-year-old cutting in 20 years, you have about a 20-foot tall Edward Stevens holly. So that's about how long it takes for this rooted cutting to become a tree like this. And then many things have to happen in that 20-year period to achieve a specimen tree like this. And look for that information in a future article in the Holly Society Journal, and future videos as well. So this is Ilex opaca clarendon spreading. You can see the ends of the branches where we have taken cuttings from this particular plant. There's a good example right here. And you can also see that the growth habit of this particular selection of spreading holly is different than that of Maryland dwarf. Maryland dwarf tends to spread out more horizontally, more laterally. Clarendon spreading tends to grow upright for maybe the first 2 or 3 years after planting in the field, and then it will start to spread out after that. So we're kind of next to a redbud tree here that's shedding its leaves, so that's the leaves have kind of fallen into the clarendon spreading. But this is a really nice, fast-growing, low native evergreen, and there are just not a lot of plants on the market in the industry that fit that description. And with the trend, and I'm not even sure if it's necessarily a trend, I hope it's here to stay, of using native plants, I do find a lot of my wholesale and retail customers want to know what they can plant that is native, that is evergreen, and that is low, that does not grow into a tree. And this selection of holly certainly does fit that description. The clarendon spreading is a female. You can see the berries. Last year, the berry set on Clarendon spreading was phenomenal. It had the most berries that I've ever seen on that particular selection. This year, the berry set is much more sporadic. In conclusion, mist settings need to be adjusted accordingly every day. It all depends on temperature and environmental conditions outside as well as inside the greenhouses, especially the stage that the crop that has just been stuck is at. So we do try to get as many cuttings cut and stuck in a short amount of time as possible, so we don't have to adjust the mist to many different settings on any given bench. It just becomes difficult to keep track of things that way. So good luck with rooting your cuttings, and thanks for watching this video.